OJ mentioned that she was maturing spiritually. I feel like I'm maturing. Someone said the other day they thought I was going into my second childhood. I thought that was good, because that means I've got out of the first one. I wasn't sure that I had. But, you know, this is January, and obviously my first talk for 2019 being January. But, you know, we take our calendar from the Roman calendar, and January wasn't always the first month. In the original Roman calendar, it started with March, named for the god of war, Mars, and they had 10 months. March, April, May, on through, each of them named generally for either a god or a goddess. May was Maya, the god of spring. June was Juno, the head female goddess. And they had 10 months. And now, it amazes me when I think about this, because the Romans, you know, conquered all of the known world at the time, but their calendar only went for 300 days. And then there was just winter with no months at all. There were about 60 days that was just winter. And finally, one of the emperors said, well, we can't keep going like this. We need to have a month for all of the days of the year. And he created January and February. And then January became the first month of the year. They were still pretty crazy about months, though. You know, Julius Caesar said, well, I need a month named after me, so he changed July to be named after him for Julius. And his guy who took over after him, Augustus Caesar, said, well, if he has one, I need one, so I'm going to name it August. I'm thinking we could name January Angelois after Angelo. But even the Romans even doing all of this, it amazes me, because when they had 10 months, they just really didn't get around to naming all of them. Their last months were September, October, November, and December. Those mean 7, 8, 9, and 10. But then when they added 2 months, that means our months, 9, 10, 11, and 12, October, November, December, or October, September, October, November, December, actually mean 7, 8, 9, and 10. Nobody seemed to think that was significant. But anyway, here we are in January. January was named after Janus, the god of doorways. You might not even know that doorways have their own god, but they do. Janus is a god that has 2 faces. One face goes forward, one face looks back. And when it comes to religion, a lot of religions, and I'll talk about traditional Christianity primarily, always look forward. That's what it's all about. What's important in these kind of religions is not what's here now even. It's what's going to happen in the future. Obviously, some point in the future, we're going to pass away. That's what we need to be thinking of. But even beyond that, we need to be thinking of the end of days. The end of days is going to happen some point in the future. And there was a lot of different discussion about what that meant, but it was going to happen, and that's what we need to be concentrating on. So the other part, of course, was it's really important we focus on the future, because we're only going to be here for this lifetime, and then for eternity, we're going to be either punished in hell or rewarded in heaven. And by the Jehovah's Witnesses, 144,000 people make it to heaven only. So that makes it very significant that we pay attention to the future. Now, originally in Judaism, there wasn't a heaven. There was Sheol, which was much like the Greek Hades, which was just sort of a underground place where souls kind of wandered around in a bleak area. Sort of like me when I get up in the morning and I'm just wandering around my house in the days. But then they said, well, you know, we should have a place for good people and a place for bad people, so it was divided up into two different areas. It was all still very vague. But all of this developed over time. By the time of Jesus, one of the prime ideas was that time was divided into two, the time of the earth. And in the first half of it, the devil ruled. And in the second half, then God would send down the anointed one who would fight off the devil and win, and then rule the earth after that, and everything would be wonderful. That concept was that when you passed away, your soul just kind of hang around there, and then the bodies would be resurrected, and we would all live happily after that time. That doesn't seem to have happened yet, so apparently the devil is still running the earth. I think that explains a lot. But then, over the centuries, the idea developed that, well, you know, God's up in heaven, so good people should go up there with God as well. And so it became, again, very important to focus on the future so you could be one of those people who are going to go up to heaven. And for centuries, it still goes on. There's this huge debate of what gets you there. Is it knowing the right beliefs and the right rituals? Is it worshiping Jesus and God? Is it going to church every day? Coming to the PLC guarantees it, by the way. So this whole concept is focus on the future, that's what's important. But the great master teacher Jesus, I'm not sure that he really believed that. In the secret gospel of Thomas, Jesus says, his apostles have asked him about when's the end of days coming, when is the kingdom of God coming? And he says, do you seek the end that you already know the beginning? For at the beginning you will find the end. Blessed is he who stands at the beginning, for he will see the end and will not know death. Now that puts a lot of emphasis on the beginning instead of the end. Now fortunately, here we are in January at the beginning, and Janus has this face that looks back to the beginning. So why is the beginning important? Well, I think there's two aspects of that, two ways we can look at it. The esoteric and the exoteric. Exoteric, or more, let's say, physical, common way, is as significant as beginnings. There's a saying, well begun, what is it? Well begun, half done. There we go. Well begun, half done. Meaning that how you begin something is very significant. I mean, think about this. You want a house. You're going to have a new house, and you have all these parts of it you love. You want these big windows. You have the bedrooms just as you want them. You design it. You get with a contractor. He says, oh, yeah, I pay attention to all those details. And he builds this beautiful house for you. And then as you're looking at it and talking to him, you realize that he didn't pay any attention to the foundation. And there's old concrete, and he didn't make sure that the ground under it was solid, so water washes it out and the foundation cracks. If you don't pay attention to the beginning, it's hard to have a good ending. But there's really the esoteric part that's much more critical, I think. And I think what Jesus was referring to was the second law of thermodynamics. So you're all familiar with that. Basically, what it says is in the universe, entropy always increases. Now, I'm not mispronouncing that. I'm not saying empathy. We want empathy to increase. But entropy, and although there are technical definitions, basically it means complications. It means things getting more diverse and complicated and chaotic, if you will. So think about this. By the best theory we have at the beginning of our universe, the Big Bang Theory, the beginning of the universe was within the first fraction of a second, one energy. When this universe began, there was one energy. And then it divided into several energies. Those sort of solidified into hydrogen, helium, and then they created suns. Suns create the other molecules, or atoms that create molecules, that create planets, that create us. And so what the second law of thermodynamics says is things always become more complicated. Think about it. As human beings, we're created from two cells. One from our father, one from our mother. And most of us get more complicated after that. And that's the way the universe works. Our universe would not be as it is today if not for the increase in entropy. But remember, we're part of this. And so what it means is our lives are always getting more complicated. We are always being pulled into this entanglement of complications and problems and issues. That's what the universe is about. And what Jesus was saying is, we have an amazing power. Because the second law of thermodynamics says that things always get more complicated. But we have the power to reverse that and return back to the one pure energy. Now, in our lives, things are going to happen. I'm going to say something blasphemous up here. Those of you who are very sensitive might close your ears. We can't always make things the way we want. Sorry. Our thoughts have power. There's an energy there. It has power, and that energy goes out, and it helps to create what we want. It helps to change things the way we want. But it helps to do that. It influences that. But there are a lot of thoughts out there that are influencing the world. If all of you would stop thinking, my thoughts would have more power. There's 5 billion people out there influencing the world. There's the thoughts of divine spirit influencing. So to say that we can always create exactly what our thoughts is, I don't believe is correct. We influence it. We have it. But, we age. We change. I don't think there's very many of us who would say, well, yeah, 10 years old, and if you look at my body now, it's going to look just the same. I mean, I became a lot more handsome. Changes occur. We develop, we change, our bodies deteriorate. This is the way of the world. And our processes can affect that, and they can make it better for us. But they can't reverse it. But there's always balance in the world. There's always the flip side, that for every yin, there's always a yang. And just like we can say that we cannot always change the whole world, we can say that the world cannot change us. An incredible power. Because the world changes everything. And I don't mean, again, physically. It'll change us. If you don't think so, you're going to learn. Physically, the world will change you. But it can change the more significant part of us. It can change us inside. When there's all of this fear, there's hatred, there's problems, it can change us so that we become entangled in those. We take those on as us. We can start defining who we are by all of these problems and issues and hate and fear until that becomes us. But we can do something that is theoretically impossible. Reverse the second law of thermodynamics within ourselves. Because what Jesus says is, don't focus on the end, return to the beginning. And all of this mess, return to the one pure energy. And when we do that, and we have the power to do it at any time, you can do it right now. You can do it within the worst situation you can imagine. You can go back and within yourself become the one pure energy, and then you also become the light of the world.